The last night of the fair, a traveling fair arrives in a small town, drawing crowds of excited visitors. However, every year, a child goes missing on the last night of the fair, leaving no trace behind. Now, a group of young friends is determined to uncover the truth behind the curtains, and what the fair really is. The cool evening breeze enveloped Maplewood as the fair rolled in, bringing with it a cloak of excitement and anticipation. I couldn't help but smile as I watched the twinkling lights and joyous sounds filling the air, each pulse resonating like a vibrant heartbeat amidst the town. "Look at this!" I exclaimed, glancing at Emily and Tyler, who stood beside me. "It's like the whole town has transformed into an amusement park." The colors of the booths were a spectacle in themselves: red, blue, yellow, green. Each hue seemed alive, dancing under the artificial lights. The delighted screams of children mingled with the whistles of rides, creating a symphony that could only be described as magical. But behind that enchanting facade lurked a shadow that wouldn't leave me in peace. "Do you remember the stories?" I asked, trying to push away the dark thoughts. Emily and Tyler exchanged glances. The theme of the disappearances loomed over us like a dark cloud, even on this illuminated night. "Don't say that, Jake," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I just want to have fun tonight." "I do too, but—" I started, but Tyler interrupted. "Let's go to the Ferris wheel. It's a tradition, right?" He forced a smile, trying to dissipate the tension. But even as we walked, the chill running down my spine refused to fade. The Ferris wheel was undoubtedly the centerpiece of the fair. It was there that children gathered, laughing and shouting as they were lifted into the skies, unaware that for some, that joy could come at too high a price. We reached the Ferris wheel, and the view from the ground was breathtaking. The lights shimmered like stars, and the feeling of euphoria was palpable. But as we ascended, I couldn't shake the thought that haunted me: how many children had disappeared at past fairs? What truly happened when the last light went out? I looked at Emily, who seemed lost in thought, gazing at the movement below. Her distant expression reminded me of what she had lost. "Hey," I said, trying to catch her attention. "Are you okay?" She met my gaze, her eyes brimming with a sadness I didn't know how to ease. "My sister," she began, but her voice faltered. "She disappeared here, on the last night of the fair, last year." The silence that followed was heavy. Tyler, sensing the gravity of the situation, placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "We're not here to dwell on that. Let's just have fun, okay?" But his words sounded hollow, even to me. "It's not just that," I said, the knot in my throat tightening. "We need to find out what happened. We can't just ignore it." "What?" Tyler asked, raising an eyebrow. "Do you really think we should get involved? What if we don't find any answers? And what if we do?" I shot back, feeling adrenaline surge through my veins. "What if there's something we can do?" "We need to investigate," I insisted, determination growing within me. Emily took a deep breath, shaking her head. "Look, I just want this to end, for the children to come home. I don't want to lose anyone else." "Then let's find out," I said, pointing toward the fortune-telling booth just a few meters away. "That magician seems like he knows more than he's letting on. He might have answers." Tyler hesitated, but when he looked at Emily, I saw a spark of hope in her eyes. "All right, let's go. But if things get weird, we're out." We agreed in silence and headed toward the booth. The atmosphere was shrouded in an enigmatic aura, with lit candles and heavy drapes covering the walls. The scent of incense filled our nostrils, and the sound of soft music echoed in the background. In the center of the booth, the magician awaited us, his enigmatic smile not inspiring much confidence. "What brings you three to this gloomy place?" he asked, his voice smooth and hypnotic. I began, but Emily stepped forward. "We want to know about the disappearances." Her voice was steady, but I could sense an underlying tremor. The magician raised an eyebrow, shadows dancing across his face. Ah, the disappearances. An ancient tale, filled with mysteries and fears. What you seek may not be what you expect to find. We need answers, I said, more assertively. You know something about what happened to Emily's sister. He smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was a smile that seemed to know more than it revealed. All knowledge has a price, young ones. What you seek may cost more than you are willing to pay. What do you mean? Tyler asked, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The magician leaned forward, his eyes glowing with an inner light. The last night of the fair is a moment when our deepest fears become reality. The shadows that dance among the lights can take what we hold dear. He paused, as if evaluating our reactions. Darkness is powerful, and those who invoke it may not survive to tell the tale. A chill ran down my spine, and I exchanged glances with Emily and Tyler. Our faces paled as the weight of the situation became increasingly oppressive. What do you suggest we do? I asked, my voice almost faltering. The truth is a delicate thread, the magician said, slowly retreating. What you seek may be closer than you imagine. Sometimes, the best way to confront a fear is to let yourself be carried away by it. His words hung in the air like a dense fog, and a sense of unease began to form among us. We weren't just dealing with the excitement of a fair, we were facing something much deeper and darker. We're not going to let ourselves be carried away, Emily declared, her determination resurfacing. We need to find out what's going on. The magician, now with a more serious expression, gestured with his hand. What you seek may be closer than you think. But remember, fears have the power to manifest. Be careful what you wish for. With that, he stepped back, and the atmosphere inside the booth shifted. The air felt heavier, and the distant echo of the fair became a melody of laughter and screams that contrasted sharply with the darkness beginning to settle in our hearts. What did he mean by that? Tyler asked, visibly anxious. He knows more than he's saying, I replied, feeling the urgency rise within me. We need to dig deeper. We have to uncover the truth about this fair and what happened to Emily's sister. And what if we can't? Tyler questioned, his voice trembling. What if we get caught up in something we can't control? We have to try, Emily insisted, her voice firm. I can't just stand by knowing my sister might still be out there, trapped somewhere. And so, with renewed determination, we resolved not to let fear paralyze us. The fair might be filled with lights and sounds, but there were shadows that needed to be confronted, and we were ready to uncover the secrets hidden behind the glow of the Ferris wheel. The Maplewood Fair was in full swing that night, and the vibrant colors of the illuminated stalls struck a sharp contrast against the encroaching darkness. My friends, Emily and Tyler, and I had wandered away from the bustling activity, seeking a quieter, more secluded corner where we could discuss the strange legends surrounding the event. The sweet scent of popcorn and cotton candy hung in the air, but we couldn't distract ourselves with the treats. A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the stories we all grew up hearing, the tales of disappearances that always overshadowed the fair. Do you remember what happened to Emily's sister? Tyler asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at Emily, who seemed lost in thought, as if she were adrift in her memories. She disappeared on the last night of the fair, didn't she? I said, trying to keep my discomfort at bay. No one ever found her. Hashtag. Emily took a deep breath, as if preparing to talk about something that haunted her. Yes. She was last seen near the Ferris wheel. No one knows what happened, and my family, well, they've never been the same since. Her voice trembled, and the weight of her words hung in the air. That's so scary, Tyler said, looking around as if he were sure something was watching us. I can't understand how people just disappear like that. It's like the fair is a magnet for terror. Or a portal to something worse, I murmured, remembering the stories we'd heard about spirits and entities that fed on fear. We need to do something about this. We can't just ignore what's happening. Emily looked at me with determination. I agree. We can't just stand here while other kids might be in danger. We need to investigate. So, we decided that instead of having fun, we would venture on a quest for the truth. We walked cautiously through the fair, trying to avoid the brightly lit areas where laughter and joyful screams echoed. What we wanted was the mystery hiding in the shadows. Before long, we spotted a fortune-telling booth. The lights flickered in a hypnotic rhythm, and an atmosphere of mystery surrounded it. An enigmatic magician, with a smile that seemed more like a riddle than an invitation, watched us. He had a deep gaze that seemed to see right through us. "Are you looking for something, children?" he asked, his voice smooth and seductive, but with a tone that made my stomach churn. "We're just curious about the fair," Tyler replied, trying not to show the nervousness he felt. "Curiosity is a double-edged sword," the magician said, leaning towards us. "Sometimes, it's better not to know what lurks in the shadows. Do you know anything about the disappearances?" Emily questioned, her voice steady despite the fear consuming her. "Ah, the disappearances," he murmured, as if savoring each word. "There are secrets that should not be revealed, and the last night of the fair is a time when the deepest fears become reality." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean by that?" My voice came out weaker than I expected. "What you fear can manifest," the magician said, his smile widening. "And children, well, they are particularly sensitive to what is to come. It may be that the next child to disappear is someone you love." His words hit us like a blow. Emily bit her lip, and Tyler looked at me with a look of dread. "We need to go," he said, urgency clear in his voice. But before we could move away, the magician raised his hand. "Beware of what you wish for," he warned, his voice now darker. "Because the truth can be more terrifying than the illusion." We averted our gaze, the weight of the conversation leaving us restless. We decided to explore more, trying to understand what was really happening at the fair. Our path led us to a different space, where the cheerful music of the fair seemed distant. We found a mysterious woman known as the Storyteller. She was surrounded by children, her eyes shining with a supernatural light as she spoke. The atmosphere around her seemed to change, as if time stood still. "So, do you want to hear a story?" she asked, her tone soft and captivating. As we began to listen, a strange feeling overtook me. It was as if we were being pulled into a macabre fairy tale. "Once upon a time, there was a vengeful spirit," she began, "that fed on the dreams of children. He hides in the shadows, waiting for the last night of the fair, when the magic is at its peak. And when the last light goes out, he comes to collect what is due." The atmosphere around us grew heavier, and I exchanged anxious glances with Emily and Tyler. "What happens to the children?" I asked, almost not wanting to know the answer. "Ah, that is a secret few know," the woman said, her piercing eyes watching us. "But those who dare to challenge the spirit may discover the truth. The last night is when the deepest fears become real, and many are never seen again." The tension grew among us. "We're here to investigate the disappearances," Emily declared, her voice firm. "Do you know anything that could help us?" She hesitated for a moment, and then, with a dark look, said, "The last night of the fair is not just a celebration. It's a ritual. A ritual that needs to be performed to keep the spirit asleep. But if you're not careful, you might become part of the story that is told." Unease grew within me. "This can't be true," I murmured, but fear began to seep into my mind. If what she said was real, we were in great danger. "We need to know more," Tyler said, determination in his voice contrasting with the fear consuming us. "Let's infiltrate the restricted areas of the fair. If there's a secret, we need to find it." We agreed and pressed on, entering a part of the fair that seemed abandoned. As we walked, the atmosphere changed, and the joy that had surrounded us transformed into something dark and oppressive. The lights flickered with a different intensity, and whispers seemed to echo from somewhere deep. Finally, we found an entrance that led us to a dark, dusty space. What we saw shocked us, a series of broken toys, as if they had been abandoned long ago, and old photos of missing children plastered on the walls. Terror took hold of us. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to a photo of a girl who looked to be the same age as her when her sister disappeared. "These children, they've been forgotten." "We can't let this happen again," I affirmed, feeling a knot in my throat. "We need to find out what's really going on here." Tyler, his voice trembling, said, "What if we are next? What do we do if we can't find a way out?" "We won't give up," I declared, determined not to let fear consume us. "We need to face this together. We are stronger when we are united." With that, we decided we couldn't back down. The truth was within our reach, and we wouldn't allow darkness to overtake us. With our hearts racing, we moved forward, ready to confront whatever the fair had to offer, even if it meant facing our own fears. The atmosphere of the fair was dense, almost palpable, and the vibrant light of the lanterns hanging along the stalls seemed to dance anxiously, as if trying to escape something lurking in the shadows. I, Jake, was surrounded by Emily and Tyler, and the excitement that once filled the air was now replaced by a distant and unsettling sound. As we walked, the voices of the crowd became a dull echo, and the festive music that once made me smile now felt like a symphony of warnings. It was then that we spotted the man. A familiar face, his expression was a map of pain and loss. He leaned against a fence, his eyes lost on the Ferris wheel, which turned slowly with a creaking groan. The memory of his son, who had disappeared on the last night of the fair years ago, weighed on me like a dark cloud. The man looked at us, and in his eyes, I saw what I feared becoming, despair. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice hoarse and trembling, as if each word required monumental effort. "This fair is not what it seems. But we're just—" Emily began, but he interrupted her. "This is not just a party." The intensity of his gaze made my heart race. "The last night is when everything happens. When the light goes out, what remains are not just laughter and fun. It's when fears become real." Tyler, beside me, was as pale as a sheet. He had always been the bravest among us, but now his expression was one of true anguish. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hesitant. The man hesitated, looking around as if fearing someone might hear. "My son, he was here. He was just a child, and on the last night, He looked away, the pain almost unbearable. "He never came back. No one came back. Hashtag, 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 they come to take the children, and if you're not careful, they might come after you too." A chill ran down my spine. The stories we had heard, the whispered legends among the neighbors, all began to make sense. The Ferris wheel, an attraction that once fascinated me, now felt like a trap. The boy's father continued, "No one talks about it, but the fair, it feeds on fear. And the last night is the peak of everything." Emily, her voice steady, asked, "What can we do? How can we stop this?" He shook his head, a look of despair mingling with a glimmer of hope. "You need to face your fears. It's the only way to break the cycle. But it's risky. Many have tried and failed. What you might lose, could be more than you can imagine." I looked at Emily and Tyler, the tension in the air becoming almost unbearable. It felt like we were all in a drifting boat in unknown waters, unsure if the current would take us to safety or to an abyss. "We need to know more," I said, determination growing inside me. "If there's a way to free the children, we have to find it." As we began to move away, I noticed Tyler was lost in thought. He looked at me and, with a worried expression, said, "I have a recurring nightmare about the fair. It's always the same, I'm trapped in a maze of mirrors. I can't find my way out. And when I look at my reflection, I see," he hesitated, as if the word was stuck in his throat. "I see something that isn't me." Tyler's confession made my stomach churn. He had always been the type of friend who faced everything with bravery, and the idea that he was being consumed by this fear was terrifying. "It's just a dream, Tyler," Emily said, trying to comfort him. "It can't be real." "But what if it is?" he insisted, his intense gaze fixed on us. "What if the mirrors are a doorway to something else? Something we can't understand?" The conversation led us to a dark room at the back of the fair, where we finally found the distorted mirrors. As we entered, the light pulsed irregularly, and I saw our reflections twisting and contorting into grotesque, distant forms. It was as if each of us was being confronted by a distorted version of ourselves. "Look!" Emily pointed, and we all turned to a large mirror on the wall. The reflected image wasn't just her, it was a nightmare unfolding in real time. What was behind her, a shadowy figure, made my heart stop. It was a shadow, an indistinct shape that seemed to feed off her light. "Jake!" Tyler shouted, pulling my arm, but I couldn't look away. The shadowy figure was getting closer, and a biting cold began to envelop my body. It felt as if a piece of the darkness from the mirror wanted to escape and swallow us whole. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice trembling. "This isn't just a fair." When we finally managed to pull away from the mirrors, the feeling of panic was almost unbearable. What else was that fair hiding? What more would we have to face? "Let's regroup and discuss what to do next," I suggested, the words spilling out quickly. We needed a plan, and somehow, every second that passed became more critical. "What do you think all of this means?" Tyler asked, panting. "I feel like we're being watched, as if we're inside a game." Emily looked at us, her eyes shining with renewed determination. "We need to go back and talk to the woman who told the story about the vengeful spirit. She might know more about what's happening here." I agreed, but a part of me hesitated. What more could we discover? What more could we lose? As we walked back, the fair seemed to shift around us, the lights flickering erratically and the sounds of the crowd becoming distant whispers. It was as if the very environment was molding itself from our fears, turning into a labyrinth of uncertainties. The Ferris wheel turned in the distance, its slow movement contrasting with the growing urgency I felt inside me. What would happen on the last night? What was truly at stake? The answers seemed to slip further away with every step, and the only certainty I had was that we were about to uncover what really lurked in the shadows of the Maplewood Fair. The atmosphere of the fair pulsed around me, as if the music and laughter of the children intertwined into a vibrant symphony. But even with all the joy, my heart was heavy. Emily, Tyler, and I had just left the storyteller's booth, and her words still echoed in my mind. The vengeful spirit, the stolen dreams, all of it felt more than just a legend. It was a terrifying reality unfolding beneath our feet. "We need to confront that magician," I said, my voice firm, but anxiety gnawing at me inside. "He knows more than he's saying." Emily hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she considered the implications. The memory of her missing sister consumed her, and I could see the internal struggle she faced. Tyler, on the other hand, seemed to be battling something different, fighting against his own fears that haunted him. "Do you really believe he'll help us?" Tyler asked, his skeptical tone evident. "That guy is a mystery, and mysteries usually aren't good. I didn't say he's an ally, but we have to try. We need to understand what's happening," I insisted, feeling the weight of responsibility building on me. "He's our only connection to all of this." Emily took a deep breath, determination starting to shine in her eyes. "If he has anything to do with what happened to my sister, then I want to confront him." We moved forward, the lights of the fair flickering around us as if they were trying to warn us about what was to come. The magician's booth was right there, shrouded in a cloak of shadows, and the atmosphere around us seemed to shift, as if the very air was charged with anticipation. "Jake, are you sure about this?" Tyler asked, his voice a whisper. "What if he's not who we think he is? We don't have a choice. If we want to uncover the truth, we have to take the risk." I approached the booth, heart racing. The decor was extravagant, with colorful fabrics and the scent of incense hanging in the air. The magician sat behind a table, his imposing presence and penetrating gaze fixed on us. He smiled, but there was something sinister about that expression. "You finally decided to come closer," he said, his voice smooth and hypnotic. "What do you seek, curious young ones?" "We want to know the truth about the fair," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "About the disappearances." The magician's smile widened, but it didn't bring comfort. "Ah, the truth. A dangerous quest, don't you think? The last night is always a time for revelations, but not all are pleasant." "You know what happened to Emily's sister," Tyler interrupted, the tension evident in his tone. "We need answers." The magician leaned back in his chair, watching us with eyes that seemed to know more than they should. "Answers? What are you willing to sacrifice for them?" A wave of nervousness coursed through my body. What did he mean by that? Emily's gaze intensified, and I knew she wouldn't back down. "We're not here to make deals," she said, her voice firm. "We want to know what you did." A heavy silence settled in, and the magician tilted his head as if pondering our words. His eyes sparkled with an almost supernatural glow, and the atmosphere around us seemed to change once again. "What you seek is beyond comprehension," he said, his voice now a whisper. "The children who disappeared are not lost, but rather, transformed." "Transformed into what?" I asked, curiosity mingled with fear. "Into something more powerful than you can imagine," the magician replied, his lips curving into an enigmatic smile. The discomfort intensified as his words sank into our minds. I looked at Emily, who was frozen, and at Tyler, who seemed on the verge of collapse. "Are you saying they are alive?" Tyler asked, his voice trembling. Hashtag, alive, but not as you know them," the magician murmured. "The last night is when everything is revealed, and what you fear may become reality." "What do you mean?" I questioned, frustration starting to build. "What happens when the last light goes out?" He leaned forward, his eyes shining with a disturbing intensity. "In the darkness, your deepest fears take on flesh and bone. Those who are not prepared to face the truth may be lost forever." A chill ran down my spine. The stories we had heard were becoming more concrete, more real than I could have ever imagined. "What do you know about my sister?" Emily demanded, her voice firm, but her eyes filled with despair. The magician hesitated for a moment, a shadow crossing his face. "The last night is a moment of choices. She made hers." "What do you mean by that?" I asked, feeling that we were diving into a bottomless abyss. The magician looked at us, his smile fading. "Every child that disappears is trapped between worlds. They were not taken, they chose to follow the call of the unknown." "Are you saying my sister wanted this?" Emily exclaimed, the pain in her voice almost unbearable. "The desire for adventure can be treacherous," the magician replied, his voice now somber. "And the last night is the night of final choices." A heavy silence fell over us as the implications of his words settled in. I felt the weight of responsibility upon me, the need to protect my friends, and at the same time, the urgency to discover the truth. "And what happens to those who do not choose?" Tyler asked, his voice almost a whisper. The magician smiled again, but now there was no joy in his gaze. "Those who hesitate may lose themselves in the labyrinth of their own fears." I looked at Emily and Tyler, despair reflected in their faces. It was a dangerous game, and we were at its center, not knowing how to escape. "We need to go," I said, determination growing inside me. "If what you say is true, we have to prepare." The magician nodded, but his gaze was that of a predator. "The last night approaches, and your choices will begin to reveal themselves. Remember, young ones, fear is a shadow that can consume even the bravest." We left the tent, the feeling of despair wrapping around us like a dark cloud. The fair around us now seemed different, the sounds of music and laughter echoing like a distant reminder of something lost. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "We need to find out more," Tyler replied, determination in his tone. "We can't let this continue." The last night was approaching, and with it, the truth we feared most. As we walked through the fair, the light from the lanterns swayed, creating shadows that danced around us. Fear became palpable, and the feeling that something was watching us grew with every step. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," I said, trying to offer comfort. But deep down, I knew the darkness was closing in, and the real battle was just beginning. The atmosphere of the fair began to feel oppressive, as if an invisible weight was accumulating on our shoulders. My friends and I, Jake and Tyler, sought refuge in a candy tent, the only thing that seemed to offer us a bit of comfort amidst the growing chaos. The sweet smell of cotton candy and caramel popcorn couldn't, however, dissipate the anxiety that enveloped us. "We need to think about what to do," Tyler said, his tense voice cutting through the heavy silence surrounding us. His hands were trembling slightly, a visible reaction to the environment we were in. "That magician, he knows something. And it's not good." "I agree," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising sense of despair. "But what does he want from us? If he really is behind the disappearances, we can't just ignore him." Jake, who had been observing the frantic movement of the fair through the fabric curtain of the tent, turned to us. His eyes were penetrating, filled with a determination that I hoped would reflect in all of us. "We need to find out what's going on. If those disappearances are related to the magician, then that's what we need to confront. And what if he's more powerful than we can imagine? What do we do if we can't escape?" Tyler asked, worry evident in his voice. "We need to have courage," I said, trying to motivate them. "If Emily's sister is still out there, we have to try to save her. We can't let fear paralyze us." The thought of Emily and her missing sister weighed on us like an anchor, a constant reminder of what was at stake. I looked at her, who was quiet, lost in her thoughts. "Emily, are you with us?" I asked, needing to know she was determined too. She lifted her head, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and resolve. "Yes, I am. I can't leave it like this. I can't allow more children to disappear. We need to do something, and fast." The atmosphere around us seemed to change. The whispers that had been mere distant echoes now became clearer, like voices floating in the shadows. It was as if the fair itself was watching us, a living, pulsating entity. A cold shiver ran down my spine, making me involuntarily hunch. "It's getting weirder," I muttered. "We need to go," Jake insisted, his voice firm, but also laden with a nervousness that was hard to ignore. "Let's find the mysterious woman again. She might give us answers." I stepped out of the tent, feeling the ground vibrate beneath my feet. The glow of the fair lights seemed dimmer, and the colors more muted. All of this made me uneasy, as if we were being pushed toward a confrontation we weren't ready to face. But Jake's determination, the urgency in Emily's eyes, and Tyler's need to resolve his own anxieties propelled me forward. We left the candy tent and made our way to the center of the fair, where shadows stretched and lights flickered, as if they were struggling against the encroaching darkness. The path to the mysterious woman felt longer than before, each step echoing within us. "Do you really think she'll have the answers we need?" Tyler asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "She knows more than she's letting on," Jake replied, his gaze fixed ahead. "And we need to know if there's a way to stop the disappearances." As we approached the area where the woman used to tell her stories, we felt a pressure in the air, as if something was about to happen. The environment was charged with palpable tension. Her tent was illuminated by a soft light, but what should have been comforting now felt more threatening. "Do you feel that?" Emily asked, gripping my arm. "Like something is about to be revealed." "Yes," I replied, trying to mask the cold I felt. "But we have to keep going." We entered the tent, and the woman was there, sitting in a wooden chair, her hands intertwined on her lap. She looked at us, her deep, wise eyes reflecting an understanding that seemed far beyond our experiences. "You've returned," she said, her voice soft, but carrying a weight that resonated with our anxieties. "What do you wish to know?" Jake stepped forward, his tone serious. "We need to understand what's happening at the fair. The magician, he knows something. He's behind the disappearances, isn't he?" The woman sighed, her eyes closing slightly as if weighing her words. "Yes, he knows many secrets. The fair is a place of enchantment, but also of darkness. Many do not see beyond the glow of the lights. So, what do we need to do?" I asked, feeling the urgency of the situation. "How can we stop this?" She looked at us, her eyes seeming to pierce into our souls. "There is a ritual that must be performed on the last night. But, it requires a sacrifice. Something must be given to break the cycle of pain." "Sacrifice?" Tyler repeated, his voice trembling. "What does that mean?" "It means that someone must be willing to give up something very precious. Hashtag, something you might not be ready to lose," the woman replied, her expression turning more serious. "We can't let more children disappear." Emily interjected, her voice firm. "If there's a way to save them, we're willing to do whatever it takes." There was a determination in her tone that sent a chill down my spine. What were we truly willing to sacrifice? And more importantly, what did that mean for each of us? The woman seemed to read our thoughts, and her words struck like a blow. "You have no idea what you're about to face. This place is not just a fair. It's a portal to something much darker. And once you enter, there's no guarantee you'll return." The whispers around us intensified, as if the fair itself was responding to her declaration. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, a premonition that we were getting into something far greater than we could comprehend. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, his voice now laden with an urgency that couldn't be ignored. "If the last night is approaching, we need to prepare. And what if the adults in town find out what we're doing?" Tyler questioned, concern evident in his tone. "What if they try to silence us? We can't let ourselves be intimidated. We need to act," I declared, my heart pounding in my chest. "Let's gather and think of a plan. But first, we need to leave." As we turned to leave, a group of adults entered the tent, their faces grim and expressions serious. I recognized some of them as members of the Maplewood community, people who had always seemed so normal, so trustworthy. But now, their aura felt threatening. "You shouldn't be here," one of the men said, his voice deep and authoritative. "This is no place for children." "We're just listening to a story," Jake replied, trying to remain calm, but I could sense the tension in his posture. "Stories that aren't meant for your ears," the mysterious woman interjected, her voice firm. "You have no idea what you're doing. The last night is approaching, and many prefer to keep their eyes closed to the truth." The adults exchanged nervous glances, and the atmosphere in the tent became electrically tense. "The last night is a moment of truth that you're not ready to face," one of the men said, his voice low but filled with threat. With my heart racing, I looked at Jake and Tyler, feeling the pressure mounting around us. "We need to go now," I whispered, pulling them toward the exit. As we stepped outside the tent, the air felt heavier, and the fair's atmosphere had changed. The lights flickered faster, and the whispers turned into distant screams. A sense of despair began to settle in me, as if something was approaching, and time was running out. "They're trying to silence us," Jake said, a determined expression forming on his face. "We need to find a safe place to plan our next move." We walked quickly, our voices nearly drowned out by the growing noise of the fair. Fear enveloped us, but the determination in our hearts was stronger. I knew the last night was approaching, and there was no turning back. As the atmosphere of the fair grew heavier, my friends and I decided to return to the tent where we had found the mysterious woman, the storyteller. With each step, the sounds of laughter and music seemed to fade away, as if the fair itself was pulling us away from its light and joy. The air was thick with tension that left me uneasy, and with each moment, my resolve to uncover the truth grew stronger. "Jake, are you sure we need to go back?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. She looked around, as if expecting something or someone to follow her from the shadows. "We have to know what she knows," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "If there's a chance to save your sister and the other children, we need to understand what is happening here." Tyler, who was walking beside me, looked just as anxious as we felt. He nodded in agreement, but I could see his hands trembling. I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know how. What we were about to face was something none of us could predict. When we arrived at the woman's tent, the weak candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The aroma of dried herbs and spices filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of cotton candy and popcorn still wafting from outside. The woman was there, sitting at her table, watching us with a deep, piercing gaze. Her expression was one of wisdom and, at the same time, a mystery we couldn't decipher. "Back for more stories, young ones," she said, a cryptic smile on her lips. "Or have you come seeking answers?" "We need to know about the disappearances," Emily said, her determination blending with anguish. "The last night of the fair. What happens to the children?" The woman sighed, as if weighing the burden of the words she was about to share. She gestured for us to come closer, and we obeyed, sitting around the table. "The last night is a dark moment," she began, her voice soft yet grave. "It's when the deepest fears become reality. When the lights go out, the dreams of the children become trapped by a vengeful spirit that feeds on their hopes and joys." "But what about the children who disappeared?" Tyler asked, his voice trembling. "What happened to them?" The woman leaned forward, her eyes shining with a light that seemed to come from a very distant place. "They are taken to a dark dimension, where their souls are consumed to feed the fair. To break this cycle, there is a ritual that must be performed on the last night. But..." She hesitated, and the expression on her face turned somber. "The ritual requires a sacrifice." A chill ran down my spine. The word sacrifice echoed in my mind, and I realized the atmosphere was shifting around us, becoming more oppressive. "Sacrifice?" I asked, trying to grasp what that meant. "Sacrifice of whom?" "The ritual requires that someone offers a part of themselves," the woman explained. "Not just an object, but a piece of your essence, something you value deeply. This is necessary to open the portal and free the trapped children." I looked at Emily, whose eyes were filled with tears. The idea of losing even more was unbearable for her. Tyler, on the other hand, seemed lost in his own thoughts, as if he was trying to calculate the consequences of everything we had heard. "And if we don't do it?" Tyler finally asked, his voice low. "What happens if we don't perform the ritual?" The woman hesitated again, and I could feel the tension rising. "If you don't, the fair will continue to exist, and the children will remain trapped. And in the next iteration, more children will disappear. It's an endless cycle until someone has the courage to break it." "But that means someone will have to be sacrificed," Emily whispered. "That's terrible. How can we choose who should be sacrificed?" "It's not about choice," the woman replied, her voice now filled with compassion. "The sacrifice must come from a heart willing to let go of its fear for love. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is to put yourself in danger to protect those you love." I looked at my friends, feeling the weight of her words. What we were about to face was greater than any of us could imagine. The fate of the children, including Emily's sister, was in our hands, and we were about to confront something that could change everything. "What do we need to do?" I asked, trying to maintain steadiness in my voice. "We must unite and confront our own fears," the woman said. "Only then can we break the cycle and save the children. But remember, the sacrifice required may be more than you are prepared to give. We can't let this happen." Emily exclaimed, her determination renewed. "I need to save my sister, and if that means facing my fears, then I will do it. ####. I knew she was right, but fear still nestled in my heart. What would happen if I couldn't face what was about to be revealed? What if I was the only one to fail? Tyler seemed hesitant, his mind clearly wrestling with the idea of sacrificing himself for someone he had never met. What if we can't do it? What if we're not strong enough? Then the fair will continue to consume the children, the woman said, her voice now taking on a grim tone. And you will have to live with that. Think carefully, young ones. What are you willing to risk? I looked at Emily and Tyler, and a heavy silence hung over us. What we were about to do was more than just confronting a vengeful spirit, it was about facing our own fears and traumas. And as the reality of what was at stake became clearer, I realized that the battle was not just external, but internal as well. We're in this together, I said, trying to convey confidence. If we're going to do this, we'll do it together. We won't let fear win. Emily nodded, and I saw the flame of determination burning in her eyes. Tyler, despite his fear, also seemed to find strength. Together, then, he affirmed, his voice now more resolute. Let's face this. The woman smiled slightly, as if she were satisfied with our resolution, but her gaze still carried a weight of warning. Then go. Prepare yourselves, for the last night approaches. The moment of truth will be when the lights go out and your fears become real. With those words, we left the tent. The fair was darker than before, and the sounds that had once been joyful now seemed distorted and threatening. We knew our time was running out and that the only way to save the children was to confront what we feared most. As we walked through the fair, a sense of urgency enveloped me. We needed to prepare for the battle ahead, and I wasn't sure what the sacrifice we would have to make truly meant. But one thing was clear, we couldn't let fear defeat us. The atmosphere was heavy, like a dark cloak draped over Maplewood. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy still lingered in the air, but there was something else, a tension that made my stomach churn. Emily, Tyler, and I were hiding behind a game booth, our eyes fixed on the crowd that was enjoying the fair without a care. The sounds of laughter and shouts of joy contrasted sharply with the unease that dominated our thoughts. Jake, are you hearing this? Emily whispered, her eyes wide. She was pale, and I could see the memories of what she had lost tormenting her. The last night is the moment of truth, and we need to do something. I know, but what can we do? I replied, scratching my head in frustration. Those stories about disappearances. And what the mysterious woman said about the ritual. It's all too much for us to handle. Tyler, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. We need to confront the woman again. She knows more than she's letting on. If there's a chance to save Emily's sister and the other children, we have to find out what to do. I agreed, but the fear tightened in my chest. The idea of exposing ourselves to more dangers and mysteries made me nervous. But at the same time, Emily's desperation pushed me forward. I couldn't leave her to face this alone. Let's go. I said, taking a deep breath. We need to be quick and discreet. The last night is approaching, and we don't have much time. We left the booth and blended into the crowd. The glow of the fair lights now seemed more sinister, and every laugh we heard echoed like a warning. Following the path to the storyteller's tent, I felt as if something was watching us, as if the fair's shadows moved with a life of their own. Do you really think she can help us? Emily asked, breaking the silence as we walked. I hope so. Tyler replied. If she knows the secrets of the fair, maybe she'll know how we can break this cycle. As we approached the spot where the woman usually was, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavy, and the whispers seemed to grow louder, as if the fair itself were trying to warn us to stay away. When we finally arrived, the tent was empty, but there was no way to tell if the woman had left or if she was simply watching us from the shadows. This doesn't make sense. She was here just a moment ago. Emily said, visibly frustrated. Let's take a walk, I suggested, trying to stay calm. She might be somewhere else. We need to find her. We wandered through the fair, passing booths of games and food, but the atmosphere was so oppressive that the fun seemed to have vanished. What had once been a joyful event was now turning into a nightmare. The glow of the lights seemed dimmer, and the music, which once was lively, now sounded like a lament. Suddenly, Tyler stopped. "Wait, what's that?" He pointed to a booth that appeared to have been forgotten, covered by a torn tarp. We approached it, and what we found upon entering was a collection of strange, old objects, as if time hadn't passed there. Broken toys, dusty photos of smiling children, and a musty smell that made me feel nauseous. "This is disturbing," I mumbled, picking up a dusty photo. The image showed a child with a bright smile, but in the background, an indistinct shadow seemed to ride. "Jake, look at this!" Emily exclaimed, holding up a clown toy. "Do you think this belongs to one of the missing children?" "It could be," I replied, trying to push away the cold that was building in my stomach. "We have to take this back. It might be a clue. But what are we going to do with it?" Tyler asked, looking at the objects with suspicion. "What if this is a trap?" "We need to talk to the woman," Emily said, determined. "She might help us understand this." We left the booth, and the feeling of despair began to envelop us. The last night was approaching, and with each step, the fear grew. We were about to enter a territory that could be more dangerous than we imagined. "What are you going to do, Jake?" Tyler asked, interrupting my thoughts. "If we discover more about the disappearances, what do you plan to do?" "I don't know," I confessed, looking at the ground. "But I can't just stand by while this happens. What if the next child is someone I love?" Tyler nodded, and a shadow of understanding crossed his face. "That's what scares me. I feel like we're getting closer to something much bigger than us. We need to be ready for anything," Emily said, with a fierce determination in her eyes. "We won't let this happen again. We won't let her suffer like I did." When we finally found the storyteller, she was in a secluded area of the fair, surrounded by a soft light that seemed to shine apart from the rest of the fair. Her gaze was penetrating, as if she could see through us and discern our deepest truths. "You've returned," she said, her voice soft but heavy with a weight that seemed to envelop us. "I see desperation has brought you back. We need to know the truth," I said firmly. "What's happening at the fair? What do we need to do to stop this?" She smiled, but there was no joy in her smile. It was as if she knew more than she was willing to reveal. "The last night is the moment of truth. But what you seek comes at a cost. We're willing to pay the price," Emily said, without hesitation. The woman looked at her, and for a moment, I felt the energy around us shift. Sacrifice is something that always falls on those who love. If you truly wish to free the children, you must confront your own fears. "And what if we can't?" Tyler asked, uncertainty in his voice. "The last night does not forgive the weak of heart," the woman replied. "You must be prepared for what is to come." Her words hung in the air, and I knew the last night was approaching rapidly. The pressure was mounting, and I didn't know if we were ready for what lay ahead. "What do you mean by confronting our fears?" I asked, trying to grasp the depth of what she was saying. ####, you must unite and face what you fear. Only then will you find the strength needed to break the cycle of disappearances. However, remember, the sacrifice may come with a price you are not ready to pay. I felt a chill in my stomach, a premonition that we were about to embark on a path of no return. The last night was approaching, and I knew the reality we knew was about to be challenged in ways we never imagined. "We have to do this," Emily said, her voice steady. "We can't let any more children disappear." We three exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between us. It was time to gather our courage and face whatever awaited us. The last night was about to begin, and the truth we sought was closer than we could ever imagine. The final night of the fair was drawing near, and a sense of anxiety hung in the air, like a thick fog enveloping each of us. My friends, Emily and Tyler, and I were hidden behind a candy booth, watching the blinking lights and the sounds of the fair that seemed more distant, as if we were in a world apart. Adrenaline coursed through our veins, but the truth we had uncovered weighed heavily on our hearts. What were we going to do, after all? The idea of confronting the vengeful spirit and performing the ritual was terrifying, but the determination to save the missing children drove us forward. "Look!" Emily whispered, pointing toward the Ferris wheel in the distance. "It looks different." I followed her gaze and noticed that the lights on the Ferris wheel were blinking erratically, as if it had a life of its own. The towering structure spun slowly, but there was something sinister about the way the seats swayed, as if they were ready to swallow anyone who dared to ride them. A shiver ran down my spine as I imagined how many children had disappeared there. "We need to go over there," Tyler said, breaking the tense silence. "That's where it all happens. That's where the ritual must be performed." "But, what if the magician is there?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "He might stop us." I knew her fear was justified. The magician, with those penetrating eyes and that unsettling smile, seemed to know more than he was willing to share. The memory of his presence left me uneasy, but there was no time to waste. We needed to act, and we needed to act fast. "We have to face this. If we don't do it now, it might be too late," I said, trying to inject some courage into our spirits. "Together, we can do this." Emily nodded, though her expression still showed hesitation. Tyler, on the other hand, was determined. He stood up and started walking toward the Ferris wheel, and Emily and I had no choice but to follow him. As we approached, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. The laughter and music of the fair seemed distant, muffled by an echo of whispers that floated through the air. It was as if the fair itself was watching us, waiting for a moment to reveal its dark secrets. "Look at the Ferris wheel," Tyler said, stopping abruptly. "It's spinning faster. Why is this happening?" I looked at the Ferris wheel and realized it was not just spinning, it seemed to emit an almost hypnotic sound, as if it were calling to us. The lights blinked in a pattern that reminded me of my heartbeats, quickening and out of sync. "It's like it wants to draw us in," I murmured, feeling a cold dread. "We need to focus and not let ourselves be swayed by this." Finally, we reached the base of the Ferris wheel. The view of it up close was even more terrifying. The metal structures creaked, and the light emanating from the bulbs seemed dimmer, as if life were being drained from them. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with fear. "What if we can't do it? What if this is a trap?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "We have to take the risk. We can't let fear win," I said, trying to sound as firm as possible. "Let's find a place to perform the ritual." With one last look at the Ferris wheel, we began to move toward the fair's center, where everything seemed darker and charged with a strange energy. As we moved away from the Ferris wheel, I noticed the whispers became more intense, almost as if they were communicating among themselves. "What are they saying?" Tyler asked, looking around with a worried expression. "I don't know, but it sounds like they're warning us about something," I replied, trying to listen more closely. "It's as if they're telling us not to go any further." "Let's keep going," Emily insisted, her determination growing as the fear intensified. "We can't stop now." Eventually, we arrived at a more central area of the fair. The lights blinked frantically, and the music that was once cheerful turned into a dissonant melody. The air was thick, and I could feel the presence of something malevolent looming, watching us. It was then that the magician suddenly appeared before us. He seemed to materialize out of nowhere, like a shadow emerging from the darkness. The smile on his face was unsettling, and his eyes shone with a brightness that made me feel as if I was being scrutinized. "Ah, the little investigators," he said, his voice smooth and melodic, but with a tone that made my stomach churn. What brings you to this very special place? I straightened up, trying to appear more confident than I actually felt. The urgency of the situation pushed me forward. We know what you've done. We know about the disappearances, I said, my voice trembling slightly before I could compose myself. We're here to put an end to this. He laughed softly, as if he was enjoying a theatrical performance. Ah, but you have no idea what you are about to face. The last night of the fair is a moment of truth. A moment of revelation, he replied, leaning slightly forward, his eyes fixed on me. I felt my confidence waver under his penetrating gaze. I knew he was trying to intimidate us, but we couldn't afford to show weakness. I was interrupted by Emily, who stepped forward. What do you want from us? She questioned, her voice more resolute than mine. You need to stop this. There are missing children, and we need to save them. The magician smiled even wider, and I could see a sinister glimmer in his eyes. Ah, my dear, the children are just part of the game. They are the fuel, what feeds the magic that permeates this fair. And you are merely pieces on this board, he replied, emphasizing his words in a way that sent a chill down my spine. The tension between us was palpable. I looked at Tyler, who seemed as perplexed as I was. What did he mean by game? How could we be part of something so horrific? The idea of being mere pawns in this scheme made me feel sick. But why? Why do this? Tyler asked, his voice laden with disbelief. Don't you care about the lives you're destroying? The magician shook his head slowly, as if disappointed by our lack of understanding. I care, of course. But fear is a powerful force, my young friends. And that is what fuels the magic. Despair, anguish, pain, all of this is essential to my art, he said, gesturing dramatically. I looked at Emily, and the expression on her face showed she was struggling to keep calm. We needed a plan, and fast. We couldn't let him manipulate us. We're here to end this, I declared, trying to find courage in my words. We won't let you continue your macabre games. The magician stepped back, his expression shifting, as if he was assessing what we had said. The air around us seemed to change, becoming heavier, as if the fair was responding to our determination. Very well, then, he said, his tone challenging. Let's see if you truly have what it takes to face the truth that awaits you. At that moment, the atmosphere of the fair transformed. The lights began to flicker frantically, and the whispers turned into deafening screams. I felt that something was about to happen, and a sense of despair began to spread among us. What did you do? Hashtag, I screamed, trying to comprehend what was happening. The magician just smiled, and his expression was one of satisfaction that comes with absolute control. The game has already begun, and now you will have to face the consequences. Remember, the last night is the moment of truth, he said before vanishing into a cloud of dark smoke. We stood frozen, trying to process what we had just heard. The Ferris wheel began to spin even faster, and the whispers seemed to intensify, echoing around us. We had to act, and quickly. With renewed determination, we began moving toward what we knew was our final destination. The air was heavy and charged with palpable tension as we prepared to confront the magician. The Ferris wheel spun out of control behind us, its lights flashing erratically, as if possessed by a dark energy. The echoes of laughter and screams from the fair no longer sounded joyful, everything felt distant, as if we were in another dimension, surrounded by dancing shadows whispering our deepest fears. I looked at Emily and Tyler, their faces pale yet determined. Are we ready for this? I asked, my voice coming out more hesitantly than I wished. The last time we were together, we were merely trying to understand what was happening. Now, we were about to confront the one responsible for so many disappearances. We have to do this. Not just for us, but for all the children who disappeared, Emily replied, a resolute glint in her eyes. I knew the pain of losing her sister drove her, but I was also concerned about what that could mean for her. Tyler nodded, his expression a mix of fear and courage. Then, emerging from the darkness, the magician appeared, his eyes shining intensely under the flickering lights of the fair. He moved with an almost supernatural grace, as if floating. "Ah, how interesting to see you here, young intrepid ones," he said, his voice smooth but laden with an underlying threat. "You have no idea what you are about to face." "We know exactly who you are," I said, trying to sound more confident than I truly felt. "You are responsible for the disappearances. The children, they are in your hands." A disturbing smile spread across the magician's face, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Responsible? Yes, perhaps. But there is so much more at stake than you can imagine. He stepped forward, the fair's light casting a sinister glow on his face. The children who have disappeared, they are not mere victims. They are part of something much larger, a power that I have controlled for a long time. What power? Tyler asked, his voice trembling. I could see the fear in his eyes, but also a spark of bravery. He was determined to uncover the truth. The power of magic, of course. Every dream I nurture, every fear I instill, makes me stronger, the magician said, his eyes glowing as if he were in a trance. The children are the source of that power. They feed my existence in this world. And when the last light goes out, the true spectacle will begin. I knew what he was saying was true. The stories the storyteller had told us, the whispers that echoed through the fair, all of it made sense now, but I didn't want to believe it. You're lying, I said, trying to convince myself. No one deserves this. No one should be used this way. The magician shook his head, chuckling softly. Ah, but you do not understand. Darkness is an inevitable part of life. It exists to contrast with the light. Without fear, without pain, there would be no magic. And without magic, there would be no fair. He moved closer, and something about his presence paralyzed me. But you, Jake, you have a special potential. You could be much more than a simple boy haunted by his fears. You could join me and become part of this grand tapestry of magic. I would never do that. I shouted, anger and indignation taking over. If you need children to fuel your magic, then you are the real monster here. The magician smiled, but there was a glint of irritation in his eyes. He raised his hand, and the shadows around us began to move, dancing in a threatening manner. You do not understand. Every word you say, every resistance you present, only serves to intensify the darkness you carry within you. You are just like everyone else, filled with fears and insecurities. And that's why you need to be stopped. Emily shouted, stepping forward, her voice filled with determination. No matter what you do, we won't let you take any more children. The magician laughed, a deep, echoing sound that reverberated through the fair's walls. So, is that it? You three think you can stop me? That you can face your own fears and defeat me? That's adorable, but pathetic. The atmosphere around us began to change, the fair's lights flickering wildly, as if the very space was contorting in response to his presence. I felt reality starting to fade, and the tension increased with each passing second. Come on, Jake, Tyler said, his fists clenched. We need to unite. We can't let him win. You're right, I replied, taking a deep breath. I needed to gather my courage. If he feeds off our fears, then we need to confront them, together. Together, we positioned ourselves in a circle, our hands intertwined, creating a bond of strength and unity. I looked at my friends' faces and saw they were ready. Let's face this, let's confront what haunts us. The magician watched, a smug smile on his face. How lovely to see youth brimming with hope and bravery. But you have no idea what you're about to unleash. Maybe we don't know everything, I said, but we know we need to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. Then, we began to channel our energies, each of us confronting our inner fears. I closed my eyes and focused. I remembered all the times I had felt fear at the fair, the chills down my spine, the stories of disappearances, the sensation of something always watching. But as I concentrated, I realized that each of those fears was merely a shadow of my own insecurity. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, opening my eyes. A glow of determination illuminated my gaze, and I saw that Emily and Tyler were doing the same. The shadows around us began to twist as if trying to escape us. "You can try, but you won't succeed," the magician said, his voice now filled with rage. He began conjuring spells, and the shadows grew denser, enveloping us in an oppressive darkness. The whispers intensified, and I could feel the fears that were once scattered particles forming into a storm around us. But we held our ground, united. "Come on, focus. What binds us is stronger than what divides us," I shouted, and the light radiating from us began to shine brightly, dispersing the shadows. The magician, now furious, advanced, but we did not back down. "Light cannot defeat darkness," he roared, his voice echoing like thunder. "You're wrong," Emily responded, the strength in her voice resonating. "Light will always find a way, even in the deepest darkness." And in that moment, we felt the strength of unity. Our fears intertwined, and courage began to form into something powerful. It was as if we were summoning a greater force, a spirit of resistance that transcended the fair itself. The shadows started to dissipate, and the magician's presence began to waver. I could feel the energy shifting, and the light intensifying around us. "Now!" I shouted, and together, we channeled everything we had, all our feelings of love, friendship, and courage. "Enough of the fear!" Tyler yelled, his voice echoing with a force that made the walls tremble. And with that, the light exploded. It was as if time had stopped. The light expanded, engulfing everything in a blinding glow, and the shadows began to fade away. The magician screamed, his form distorting under the pressure of our unity. I knew we were about to confront something that could change everything, but we could not retreat. ####, our fears were being confronted, and the truth was about to be revealed. The battle was just beginning, and there was no turning back. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and I could feel my heart racing. Emily and Tyler stood beside me, their pale faces reflecting the anxiety we were all feeling. The Ferris wheel spun out of control, its lights flashing as if warning us that we were about to cross a line that could not be undone. I knew it was now or never. The fair's final night was not just a festive event, it was the culmination of everything we had faced, all the fears we had tried to ignore. "Jake, are you sure about this?" Tyler asked, his voice trembling as he looked at the Ferris wheel. "What if we can't do it? What if all of this is in vain?" "We have to try, Tyler," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I actually felt. "If we don't do anything, who knows how many more children will disappear? We need to free those who are trapped here. We need to perform the ritual." Emily squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "We'll do it together. We can't let fear paralyze us now." We joined hands in a circle, and I could feel the energy between us. It was as if our fears and hopes were intertwining, forming an invisible force that pulsed in the air around us. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to connect with that energy. What we were about to do was greater than just the three of us. "Let's channel our fears," I said softly but firmly. "Only then can we summon the vengeful spirit and break the magician's spell." "And what if he attacks us?" Tyler asked, his voice hesitant. "What will we do if he comes after us?" "We need to face this together," Emily asserted. "We're not alone. We have each other, and that makes us stronger." I opened my eyes, looking at each of them. Emily's words echoed in my mind. We weren't alone, and that gave us courage. "Okay, let's do this. Remember, we need to confront our fears. If we are strong, we can break the spell." With that, we began to concentrate. I closed my eyes again and let the darkest memories rise in my mind. I remembered the first time I went to the fair, when I was just a kid. The joy, the laughter, the smell of cotton candy and popcorn, and then, the darkness that followed. The stories I had heard, the disappearances, the children who never returned. The fear I had always carried about what could happen. But now, I knew I had to face it. I remember the first time I saw the Ferris wheel, I began, my voice trembling. It was magical, but now I see it hid dark secrets. I'm afraid of losing those I love, of being powerless in the face of what's to come. Around me, I heard the whispers of Emily and Tyler. They were also opening up, sharing their fears and doubts. It was a painful but necessary process. The energy between us was growing, and I could feel the presence of the spirit coming to meet us. I'm afraid my sister will never come back, Emily confessed, her voice barely a whisper. She disappeared on the last night of the fair. I don't want that to happen again. I'm afraid of failing, Tyler said, frustration in his voice. I don't want to be a coward. I want to be strong, but this fair, it haunts me. I can't take it anymore. As each of us shared our fears, the atmosphere around us began to change. I felt a growing presence, as if something was awakening in response to our call. I could hear the whispers around us intensifying, echoing in our ears. It was as if the fair itself was responding to our call. Now, let's summon the spirit. I shouted with all the strength I could muster. Together. Immediately, a wave of energy coursed through our bodies. The fair's lights began to flicker more intensely, and the Ferris wheel stopped abruptly, as if waiting for us, ready to be confronted. The darkness around us deepened, and I realized the magician was approaching. Do you think you can defeat me? He laughed, his voice resonating with a threatening tone. You have no idea what you're facing. We know more than you imagine. I challenged, feeling a surge of courage. We're here to free the children and put an end to your wicked plans. The magician smiled disturbingly, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. And for that, you'll need much more than bravery. You'll need a sacrifice. Suddenly, I realized that the true sacrifice was something deeper than just a life. It was his very essence. You feed off fear, don't you? I shouted, understanding the truth. You need them to exist, don't you? The magician moved closer, his figure twisting in the shadows. Yes, and now you're about to become part of my collection. The last night is when everything is revealed, and you will be mine. Despair began to creep in, but at the same time, a new perception arose. I needed to confront not just the magician, but what he represented. He was a manifestation of my fears, my insecurities. He was the part of me that feared failing, losing everything. You are a part of me. I shouted, trying to connect with that truth. You are the fear that prevents me from living fully. And I will not let you dominate me. As I spoke, I felt a wave of energy forming around us. Emily and Tyler stood beside me, their hands intertwined with mine. Together, we began to invoke the essence of the spirit, calling it to manifest. The magician tried to stop us, but his attempts were in vain. The light emanating from us began to overshadow his darkness. You can't stop us. Emily yelled, her determination echoing. We are stronger together. In an instant, the energy intensified, and the figure of the magician began to unravel. He screamed, a high-pitched, desperate sound. No. This can't be happening. With one last effort, we united our voices. We are not afraid. We free the children and break your cycle. The light expanded, engulfing everything around us. The magician was consumed by the same darkness he had created, his screams echoing in the air as his essence dissolved. The Ferris wheel came to a halt, and the fair around us began to crumble, the whispers transforming into cries of joy. We did it! Tyler exclaimed, his face lit up with a smile. We did it! Emily was in tears, but her tears were of happiness. My sister. She's free. As we celebrated, a blinding light began to shine in the darkness. The vengeful spirit that had tormented the fair started to dissipate, and the missing children appeared like shadows, one by one, being freed. They joined us, their faces a mix of smiles and tears. "Thank you," one of them said, her voice soft like an echo. "You freed us." But as the joy filled the air, something within me began to stir. I felt that the battle was not over yet. I understood that the true sacrifice needed to seal the portal and ensure the children's freedom was the essence of the magician, but more importantly, it was the capacity to face my own fears. "I need to do this," I murmured, feeling a growing strength inside me. "I need to sacrifice myself so that everyone can be free." "Jake, no!" Emily cried, her eyes wide with terror. "You can't do this. If I don't, he will always find a way to come back," I explained, despite the pain it caused. "He is a part of me, and I need to confront him so everyone can live in peace." Tyler grabbed my arm, his eyes filled with dread. "No, Jake. We're stronger together. We need to find another way." "There is no other way," I insisted, feeling the pressure in my heart. "I can do this. I will do this." As the fair's lights began to fade, I felt a wave of love and gratitude from my friends. "Remember me," I said, looking at them. "I will always be with you, in spirit."